Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on the impact of emotions in negotiation. I have with me Natalie Boudou. We will get her to know soon. In a moment, we'll ask her to introduce herself in a moment. In the meantime, allow me to give a warm welcome, not only to the people joining us live, but also to the one that will be watching the recording of this event. Now, by the way, we are also very much interested to know about you. So, we will introduce each other ourselves in a moment, but how about telling us from where you're based and maybe also tells us how do you feel today? How do you feel? If there is one emotion that you're feeling joining this webinar, what will that one be? So it will be great if you tell us a bit more about how you're feeling and where you are. In the meantime, happy to see that we have people from France. And hello, Colino. Good to reconnect with you from the IMD time quite some time ago. From Canada. Then we have Aga from Basel, Switzerland. And then we have also Ilya. Hello, Ilya. From St. Gallen, bright and inspired. Why? I like the people that start putting emotions. So yes, tell us about how you feel about this webinar. And in the meantime, okay, good that quickly introduce myself. My name is Giuseppe Conti. I'm a business school professor, the founder of Conti Advanced Business Learning. I teach negotiation and influencing. These are my two areas of expertise. Natalie, how about telling us a bit more about yourself?
Hello, Giuseppe. I'm delighted to be here today. So I'm the CEO of HumanForce, and we are a coaching, training and consulting company. And we work with organizations to build emotionally intelligent cultures, to build healthy cultures and places where employees can bring their whole selves to work. And so I'm also recently an author as well, a published author this year. Yes, emotional intelligence is really a very important topic for me, Giuseppe.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. Then we have, by the way, already people from 3 continents. So maybe we are going to get even somebody from Africa, from Oceania joining us. So let's see. But certainly, we have a good representation. By the way, I appreciate the people that are joining us nice and early, from Canada, starting the day talking about emotions. Good. So let's get started with our event. Now, you have just written a nice book, right? And in your book, you explore how emotion can be our most valuable asset at work.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Do they really have a place at work, and more specifically in negotiation?
Yes, well, Giuseppe, and I'm sure you know this, that for a long time, emotions haven't really been that welcome in the workplace. It's always logic and reason that has always seemed to be the more important aspect. And so it's not always been easy to talk about this particular subject. But more and more people are realizing that emotions definitely have a valuable place at work. And in my book, I explore a number of areas, whether it's around how you lead yourself with emotions as a fundamental leadership skill to be able to work with your own emotions and to understand how you impact your team, whether it's about building connection, which is very important in today's world. A lot of people are quite lonely. A lot of people are working remotely. So emotional intelligence is hugely important to increase connection. And of course, it's very important to build positive cultures of engagement, of recognition, of belonging. These are all emotionally intelligent cultures. And Giuseppe, emotions, they impact every single aspect of our day-to-day work. We can't just leave them at home. We are, whatever we're doing throughout the day, emotions are involved, whether it's learning, for example, whether it's decision-making, whether it's being creative, whether it's having a conversation around underperformance maybe, which is a difficult conversation, or whether it's about motivating your team. All of these skills that we need and need to be doing regularly involve emotions. And when we know how to work with our emotions well, we can have great performance as well and great productivity. So yes, I'm hopefully that gives you an overall angle.
Fantastic. By the way, you see the title of Natalie's book that is scrolling down, and I also put the link into the chat. So in case you are interested to discover some more on this fascinating topic, then just click on the link. And I think I fully agree with you. And if I think about one of the key components of leadership, is really passion. So yes, we have to mobilize our emotion in order to be better leader and better negotiator. So
absolutely. And Giuseppe, I forgot to mention to you the other part of the question with regards to negotiation, because you did ask me, does emotion have a role to play in negotiation? And I mean, I don't know what your experience is, and I'm really going to be curious to hear what you think, Giuseppe. But I know that for a long time, emotion wasn't necessarily thought as a vital part of negotiation. It was much more around, the process, the strategy, the logic, the rationale, the politics, the economics maybe. But actually, the human being itself perhaps wasn't always the focal point. And I don't think that you can take the human being out of the equation if you want to have that perfect negotiation. And also in my book, I interviewed a number of leaders in my book, and I had the chance to talk to a Deputy Director General at the WTO, Zhang Cheng, who's a negotiator, Chinese negotiator. And he expressed to me that you cannot take the emotion out of negotiation. And indeed, he even worries about the fact now that in our remote workplace, negotiations might be trickier, because when we're not in the same room and we haven't got that human touch, that ability to take somebody to the one side, to have a nice conversation, he wonders as a negotiator, if that human touch will be lost. I just thought I'd mention that because I thought it was an interesting point that he raises.
Yeah. Absolutely. And by the way, the debate is even more relevant in today's environment where artificial intelligence is coming in.
Yes.
The artificial intelligence is becoming, able to process data and information much, much better than the way any human negotiator can do. So, the emotional side becomes indeed, the differentiator that human being we have. On the positive or on the negative side, on the positive, because as you said, because of the connection and understanding that you can build about the other side.
Yes.
And on the negative, because we may be biased by our emotion and end up doing less than optimal kind of solution. And maybe let's focus a bit more on negotiation in our discussion, so that that's the topic. I mean, for instance, can you talk about the main emotion that we experience during negotiation and their impact?
So researchers are looking more and more in this area, and I think the main, the main emotions would be probably fear. Anger is certainly something that you might see. Sometimes disappointment if perhaps the negotiations don't go as well, and of course excitement is another typical emotion. But you're going to have certainly the possibility of many strong emotions. And of course, these different emotions, they do impact the negotiations. Fear, anger, these are strong emotions. People like to call them negative emotions. I prefer to call them strong emotions because they're there for a reason, they have a purpose. But they do need to be worked with. Otherwise, the negotiations might not be as smooth as you hope for. So yes, those were probably the main emotions, I would say, that occur.
Yeah, and by the way, if those emotions are too strong, then they, of course, they change the way we behave during negotiation. If I have too much fear, then I'll probably be afraid to take a decision, right? Or if I'm too angry, maybe I'm not going to be able to listen properly to my counterpart, right?
Exactly. You're absolutely right, Giuseppe. What happens in our brain is that if we are not able to work with our emotions, particularly our strong emotions, then they get into the driving seat. So they become in charge, and we're not able to access our rational, our thinking, our cognitive skills. The emotions are overpowering us, and therefore we're not even able to make conscious choices. We're kind of acting on impulse almost, and that's not really what we want to have during negotiations.
Absolutely. By the way, let me make a point to the audience. This is really your LinkedIn lives. Natalie and I can chat for a while, but we want to make sure that what we are talking is what you were waiting for, right? So we'll be interested to see, if you do have any question on this topic, feel free to ask it, and we will do our best to address the question that we get. But
Yes.
we just touched about this point of that emotion, if they're too strong, then they affect the way we behave in our negotiation. So how can we emotionally prepare for successful negotiating?
Well, so it's really interesting we talk about preparation because whether we're talking about negotiations or whether we're talking about managing a difficult conversation like underperformance, or perhaps having to work on a conflictual situation, these are what we call difficult situations. And preparation is absolutely key. People don't often, I think, focus enough on how the time spent before the event can be so precious. So there are lots and lots of different things that you can do. I think one of the things that you can probably do is one of the first things that you can do is to actually think about yourself and how you are feeling about the event, about the negotiations that are gonna happen, right? Ask yourself some questions. For example, what do I want to feel when I go into these negotiations? What's the best thing that I can do to make sure that I feel in the optimal way? What could throw me off balance? What can I do to recover my balance, my poise? And pay attention and notice how you are feeling. So paying attention to yourself and getting that self-awareness means you need to stop, you need to pause, you need to have some time to think and examine how you're feeling. If you have got some emotions, you'll feel that if you have that self-awareness and that ability to pause and stop, then you should recognize and feel whether you're angry, whether you're fearful of the conversation. Usually there's going to be some anxiety, right, before the negotiations, because you don't know how it's going to go. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you don't necessarily have all the control that you would like to have. So the most common emotion going into a negotiation is anxiety. So the first thing that you can do really is to prepare yourself for that. And the other thing too is to be able to talk. If you are feeling angry, if you are having strong emotions, then you can perhaps talk to somebody about it, right? Venting or talking to people can be a really, really good way of getting out those emotions so that you actually get rid of some of that emotion before you go into the conversation. So that's really, really good. Something else that's really important, Giuseppe, is the mindset that you have. If you go into a negotiation fearing the worst or preparing for battle or with that kind of competitive feeling, then it's most likely not to go your way. You have to have a mindset which is, this is an important conversation. I know what my objectives are, I know what my goals are, but I'm not going into a battlefield. So I think having the mindset and being able to keep calm in those instances are really good. And then something else which I think is really important is to know yourself and to know what might trigger you. In what situations do you get triggered? During the conversation, what could happen which might trigger you and which might mean that your emotions are raised or are intensified? So really to think about that. So that's part of the preparation, to really think about yourself. And then the other part is to think about the other person, right? And this is where emotional intelligence is not just about yourself, but it's also about how you interact with other people. And to think about, what is the other person likely to be feeling? What are they likely to be thinking? What are going to be their challenges? And what are some of the ways in which you can establish trust and rapport and build that trust so that you have an excellent outcome? So it's really a two-sided approach, I would say, Giuseppe.
Fantastic. So I guess you got the key ideas. Just want to repeat a couple that I liked. Is one is this idea about knowing your hot buttons. What takes you off balance, so that you can already identify, anticipate what's maybe the challenge.
Yes.
And the other one, which I liked, is the idea of talking with someone. So you're going to have a difficult conversation, maybe even at home with your partner, whatever, there is a conflictual kind of situation, then, talking with somebody beforehand, then it can help you, to mitigate our emotion. And that's something that...
Yes, absolutely. And some other things too that I can think of actually, just as I'm talking to you. So in my book, I have a chapter on how you can work with your own emotions. And just going back to yourself, what's really, really helpful when we have a strong emotion is firstly, obviously, to pay attention to how we feel. Because usually that emotion, you feel it in your body somewhere. Maybe you have a knot in your stomach, or maybe your heart is beating very fast. But very often that will alert you to the fact that you have an emotion. It's not always easy sometimes to know what we're feeling. So becoming familiar with how you experience fear or how you experience excitement, where does it show up or manifest itself in your body, is really useful. And then something else which is also really good to lower the intensity of the emotion is to label it, is to actually say, wow, I'm feeling angry, or wow, I'm feeling fearful. Because as soon as you, and research and science has shown that as soon as you label it, as soon as you put a name to what you're feeling, the intensity is reduced already. So already a little trick, very simple, but actually just to acknowledge it and name it is really, really important.
Yeah, I was reading some research, in fact, that they were doing some test with people in an MRI machine, and whenever the emotion was named, was labeled, then the activity was lowering by 50%. The brain activity was decreasing by 50%. Just releasing the person from a good part of the tension that they were experiencing beforehand.
Yes, you're right. There've been a number of those sort of experiments actually, Giuseppe, including a really funny one in the university in California about when they were trying to get people to put their hand inside a box where there were spiders, and they were frightened to do so. And the people who were able to label their fear were able to actually get very close to the spider. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's a very good trick, very important.
Okay. One. Fantastic. Just, we are happy to see that there are a few questions that we are going to take in a moment. Feel free to ask some more. Just let me tell you about my next event. We do have a webinar on Friday of next week for the people that have an interest in negotiation. Negotiating in long-term business relationship is coming up Friday of next week at 2:00 Central European time, so 8:00 New York time. And we're going to put the link also of this event on the chat, just in case negotiating long-term business relationship is one of your priority area. Good. So let's start looking at some of the questions that we got from our audience. And the first one is, no surprise, linked to the topic of AI. So how important do you value emotional skills in AI times?
I think this is a hugely important topic. I don't know what you think, Giuseppe. In my book, I talk about the fact that we have obviously AI is now with us, and all these technological advances and everything. And despite a lot of efforts, we still not have reached a situation where machines are able to be empathetic as we are, or able to sense the emotions as we are. In fact, there's been a number of errors and problems with face recognition and other things that they've tried to install to get to this point. So as far as I'm aware, and as far as I know, it's the one big differentiator between us and the machines at the moment. And therefore, I think it's very important to build on it and to work on it. What do you think, Giuseppe?
Absolutely. I think now we'll see how those research that have been doing about, face recognition and emotional monitoring of the people over the negotiation is going to move forward, let's say. But yeah, at this stage, certainly, that's a differentiator.
Absolutely.
In the positive or in the negative term, but in principle, more on the positive side. Let's see what the question from Regina. How do you rate the impact of a male reacting emotional versus a lady showing strong emotional signals? So, I guess, the question is about, an emotional message versus a verbal one, an emotional message in writing, in mail versus an emotional message conveyed personally.
Well, this is a very interesting question from Regina. I actually talk about this in the book. Unfortunately, today we do have a lot of stereotypes still and myths surrounding the emotional behavior that we expect or that we judge from a woman and also from a man. So there are a lot of it's still a tricky situation. And often women who show strong emotion, whether it's in a negotiation or not, may be penalized and may be labeled badly. Anger is still more accepted. Research is showing anger is still more accepted from a man and less accepted from a woman. So yes, the question is a tricky one. It still needs to be negotiated. It's still an area there needs to be progress on this, definitely. But I would say that, despite the stereotypes surrounding the different genders, I think that we need to work with our strong emotions, whether we're a man or whether we're a woman. We need to work with our strong emotions because they will not necessarily be helpful to obtaining the best result.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. Do you think we could try to drive the emotions or just be ready to react to the counterpart emotions?
So I'm not too sure what that means. Do we think that we should try to drive the emotions? I think emotions. Yes, go on, Giuseppe. Perhaps you can.
Well, the way I understood it, maybe the way I understand it is, you want to be the one that brings the emotional context into negotiation, or you want to wait for the others to bring it. And my personal recommendation is that you should be the one bringing the emotions, because of the mirror neurons that are in our brains, our emotions are contagious. So if we bring positive emotion, we are likely to get positive emotions back. So I think if we do wanna create a collaborative context, for instance, in this negotiation, then we better be the one driving the emotional by bringing the positivity.
I totally agree with you there. I think that we can certainly drive the positivity. We can build that positivity, and we can send messages to our counterparts that we want to have a positive outcome, that we want to build a good relationship, that we're going to be flexible, adaptable. We can drive that positivity. But at the same time, we still need to be ready to react to the counterpart's emotions, because whatever you do, whatever you bring to the table, you can't always foresee how your counterpart is going to react. So there's an element of driving it, but also being ready to react, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll talk for a moment about, how do we deal, with the emotion of somebody else. But let me maybe get, the question from Ilya. Ilya is getting also a lot of people say, yeah, that's a good idea, whatever. So just let's see, what is your view of multiple personalities within all of us? I twist my baseball cap and I am a negotiating machine. I twist it back and I am a soft and light listener. Is this healthy?
Interesting. So I think there's a difference between personality and emotional intelligence. I mean, personality is something that we have, but emotional intelligence is something that you can work on, all right? So I think that whatever your personality is, your emotional intelligence is a skill. It's a skill that can be developed. And some of us, it's true, are born a little bit perhaps have a little bit more emotional intelligence than others, and some need to work a little bit harder at it. But, you know, whether it's listening or whether it's developing those, what they call soft skills, and I don't like the term soft because they're quite hard really, but whether it's working, whether it's developing your emotional intelligence, we can all do it. And it's extremely important. So even if you're the toughest of negotiators, even if you're a negotiating machine, adding in that emotional soft touch will give you the edge almost, because it is an edge. It gives you the edge in so many areas. So yes, I don't know if you agree with that, Giuseppe.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Ilya is a negotiating machine. You know, he has beaten the record. When we did the role play, he has beaten the record on the best result. So, you know, yes, somebody knows what he's talking about when we talk about negotiation. By the way, there is Ilya with another question. Okay, let's say my wife is working in a male-dominated environment.
Yes.
She has to stand up for herself far more often than she would prefer. Her other approach is to rely on natural interest of most men to protect women. She often asks for support from one or more senior stakeholder, involving the boss over direct vis-a-vis, for example.
Yes, okay. So this goes back to our conversation, Giuseppe, earlier about gender and emotions in the workplace. And I mean, if that works for Ilya's wife, and that's wonderful. I think that generally it's a very tricky subject. I do a whole day's workshop on this actually, because it is such a huge and difficult area for women to negotiate. I think that it's very important for senior women in particular to stand up for themselves. It's not so easy for the younger women at work, but the senior women, if they do notice a stereotyping, and indeed their male colleagues as well, then we should speak up about it and we should point it out because it's not right. But I think obviously, you know, you have to do the best that you can, but it's certainly a difficult area still, Giuseppe.
Yeah, good. You know, we were touching before about the other party, right? You know, so we say you have to be able to react to the other people. So maybe let me ask a final question about, you know, can you give us some tips to manage the emotion of our counterpart during the negotiations?
Yes, because you don't know what's going to happen. But I mean, the first thing, and you touched upon it when you talked about mirror neurons, Giuseppe, is we need to demonstrate empathy. So however tough we want to be in the negotiations, empathy has a place. And when I talk about empathy, it's about really being able to listen, to show curiosity, to ask questions, to understand what the other party is trying to achieve, what their aspirations are, perhaps. And I think this will open up, it will make the other person feel that they can trust you, and also that you're obviously interested in them. Something else that you can do also is to try and build up some rapport. And I think for many people, they may start the conversation with a bit of, small talk, trying to establish a little bit of a relationship, maybe a little bit of humor, for example, all those things that can create the positive atmosphere that we talked about before. And I think also what's really important is, to go into the negotiation rather than going into it as a lot of people do, I think, as a competition, with you wanting to come out with your share, the share that you hope for. You're going to get that big share that you hope for. Maybe to go into it in a more collaborative way. If you have a more collaborative approach, then that can be really helpful, because there you're working together to get the best results. So of course it's not that you're putting aside your needs and your goals, but you have a more collaborative approach where you're taking into account how the other party, the counterpart, is feeling. I think other things that you can do also is to express appreciation and respect for the perspective. When the other counterpart gives their perspective, you can show that you appreciate and respect that, acknowledging their contributions, acknowledging their value. These are skills really to show empathy and also to build trust and rapport. I'm sure that you've come across that before, Giuseppe.
Yeah, and maybe let me build a different perspective on this question. Because probably one of the challenges we may face when we are confronted with a strong emotion, right? With somebody else who is angry, somebody starts shouting or whatever.
Oh, yes.
And then, in those kind of situations, the first thing you want to do is learn to stay in control yourself. You know,
course.
because if you start, you know, then
Yes.
responding at anger with anger, then of course, you know, it's going to be difficult. So
absolutely. So that's your emotional self-control. So we've just talked about how you work with the other people's emotions, but then there's your emotion, right? What happens if somebody gets your counterpart in the negotiation gets very strong emotions and maybe raises their voice or whatever? You have to be able to stay in control. And that comes with practice. It comes with being able to breathe, being able to take a pause when you need to. Most negotiations, they don't necessarily have to be done necessarily in one meeting. You know, have that break to enable you to just take a step back. It may be that you go and have a coffee or you excuse yourself for a few minutes, whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that you don't react inappropriately as well. Lots of techniques there. There's also another technique that I talk about in the book, which is called anchoring. And anchoring is where you touch the table, or you uncross your legs, or you scratch the back of your neck, or whatever it is, which gives you that split second to be able to bring yourself back into your body and have that split second where you choose how to respond. Really, because you don't want to react, you want to choose how to respond.
Say a bit more about this anchoring, because you know that's an interesting one, right?
It
comes from neuro-linguistic program. It's a neuro-linguistic programming technique, right?
It is. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched Nadal. Have you ever watched Nadal play tennis? I mean, he does a lot of this, right? A lot of this and this and this, and you know, these are anchoring techniques. This is how he calms himself down during a match, and it's a great way for us to because essentially what we want to do is we want to bring ourselves back into our body. When we are in our body, when we're in our body, we're able to come from a place of choice. When we allow the emotions to take control, then we're not in a place of control anymore. We can't make the choice that we want to do. So anchoring it's almost like it says, it's like putting the roots of a tree into the ground. And it gives you that moment to be able to respond.
Okay. And by the way, if you want to discover some more of those techniques, you know, we do have put into the chat Natalie's book so that you can discover some more. Now, we do have another last question. If you allow, Natalie, we take 2 more questions from the audience and then we call it a day. Let's get one more from Regina. What would you classify as a strategic emotion versus an artificial emotion with no impact?
Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of a strategic emotion. I think that the most important point around emotions is that you must be authentic. And I'm talking about authenticity throughout the book, is that you must be authentic about your emotions and not, if you fake your emotion or if you force an emotion, then people obviously will sense it and then the trust will be lost. At the same time, around authenticity, you need to be able to choose the appropriate moment to express that authentic emotion. It may not always be appropriate, but the important thing I think here is that we maintain our authenticity. Artificial emotion is not a great thing to build trust or to inspire people.
Excellent, thank you. And the last question of the day comes from Aga.
Yes.
And how about the approach of renaming an emotion with other emotions that have opposite impact? For example, when we feel anxious before negotiation, after accepting that emotion, relabel them, I'm excited, which puts our body in the state of safety, not threat.
Yes, Aga, this is a really nice point. And I would actually say, I would actually slightly tweak what you're saying, Aga, and I would say it's not so much renaming the emotion, because the emotion is there, but it's actually renaming the belief that we have, because when we go into a negotiation, if we're frightened, there's always a belief behind that, right? There's a fear, the fear that we're not going to do well enough, the fear that we're not prepared, the fear that the negotiation is lost already. I don't know how many beliefs or fears that we have. And we can actually challenge that. And we can say, actually, this negotiation is a real opportunity for me to get the objectives or for us to get what we need to get out of this conversation. And actually then the emotion becomes excitement rather than fear. So we can actually turn the emotion around by challenging our mindset, by working on our mindset. So it's almost like, you know, the mindset and the emotion come at the same time. Our belief and our emotion come at the same time. If we challenge our mindset about what we feel, about what we're thinking, then the fear will dissipate and it will turn into something more positive. So thank you for that, Aga. I think it's a really good point.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you very much for our audience for being with us and contributing with a number of interesting questions. And just a quick reminder, if you're interested in negotiation and want to continue the learning journey, then on the 13th of October, there is a webinar on negotiating in long-term business relationship, 2:00 Central European Time. In the chat, you also find the link to Natalie's book. So in case you want to go deeper into the subject of emotions, not only in negotiation, but in general, in business, as a leader, as a successful executive, then, you know, have a read through. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Thank you very much, everyone, again. Thank you, Natalie, for being with us today.
Thank you, Giuseppe. It's been a pleasure.
All the very best. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.